Okay, so hi. Hey Charlene. So I'm just gonna kind of go over um, kind of my slides that I had for last Saturday's talk I had at GCU. Um, just going over the animation pipeline. Um, and got some of those slides pulled up. So I think I'll run over to them real quick. So I started off with this. It was for the Phoenix Animation Meetup. Um, when I was told about this, I wasn't really told um, any particular thing that they wanted me to talk about. So I decided just to pretty much talk about everything. So I started off giving a little introduction to myself. So I've got like my name and kind of what I do, where I've been, who I've worked with, and all that. Um, and then I showed them this little um, demo reel of mine. I don't have this on YouTube yet, but I'm hoping for one more project to come out before I do that. Um, I did cover it up though on this. I can show this right now. All right, cool. So that was that. Sorry if there's a delay with the chat stuff. It pretty much was like a minute delay for this. Anyways, so that's what I showed them. Um, and I went on to talk about the actual subject of the animation pipeline, what things um, people should expect, and what kind of roles there might be inside of them, and a little bit of the differences between the 2D and the 3D pipelines. I started off saying that if we think of a pipeline, we might think something kind of like this, where it's just a giant mess, and the reason is because unless you've done it before, it can kind of feel like a big mess like that. And on Pixar's RenderMan site, they've got this one as well. Not very in depth. On Unreal Engine, they've got this for their animation solutions page. It's pretty sleek. Sorry, it's pretty sleek. So I kind of like that about it. But it's also not very in depth, or not quite what I would want if I'm trying to kind of visualize how this pipeline works out. A really good one would be like what DreamWorks has with their animation pipeline, and it's kind of humorous. So if you haven't seen it, you should check it out. It's pretty good. This is one that I made, and in the video description, this one's actually available to be downloaded off of a Google Drive. It's just a single page PDF, so pretty simple. But it goes from everything from the script down to the distribution, as far as like things you can kind of check off on your list of things to do, and it would also help you figure out how do I want to categorize all my folders in my project, and get you that kind of information all consolidated in the right order that you want it to be in. So in like pre-production, we have the scripting. So you want like something to keep all the scripts in one location. All the scripts that correlate to that one project. And then after you've got a script, that's when you can start doing things like your art direction and some of your concept art. But you especially want to start working on your storyboard pretty soon after that. Sometimes you can get your designs first, but typically you have a rough idea from the script what characters are going to be looking like, and that's when you can start your storyboarding process. I'll talk more about storyboard and pre-production in general later on. But yeah, you've got your direction, and then if you're doing a 3D production, which that's what these blue sections are signifying, is if it's a 3D production, you're going to have to model all of your characters, get them rigged, surface textures, all that kind of stuff has to be made in this part. And then there's grooming, which kind of is an unfortunate role to have named that, but it is what it is. And then after you've got all that pre-production, it's actually a very large portion of your work to do is going to be in the pre-production. But after you've got everything set up, that's when you can start continuing on to the production stage. And the first stage would be the layout. 2D and 3D layout look a little different from each other. 2D has more to do with the layerings of your composition that you'll have in your shots, whereas 3D is going to be a basic mock-up of your stage and setup of your characters, and the most important part is the location for your camera. So you want to have that, and then once that's done, that's when you can start working into your backgrounds, getting them finalized, and then you can actually start some of your animation. If you don't have your final dialogue, you have to make sure that you get that before you can start any shots that have dialogue in them. Or at least you can't really finish any animation shots that have dialogue until you have your final dialogue. You don't want to remake it after you've already lip-synced something. So it's a pretty good one for you to keep in mind, is you gotta have your actors have all those sound bits. And your actors are going to need your storyboards before they can do their acting too, by the way. Generally, effects animations happens after your characters are made. There can be cases, though, where your effects are influencing your character's animation, and therefore the effects happen first. And then some effects are some things like cloth simulation, or you might be like simulating fire or whatever. That's one difference, that you don't have to do that in 2D animation. And then after you've got that set up, you can do all your lighting and shading. The reason I have these named differently is because in 3D animation, the term is just called lighting, like you're a lighting artist. If you're doing 2D though, they typically just call it shading. You can call it lighting, but I've seen it more often called shading. And with 3D, you can actually do the lighting, or at least get it started, right after your layout stage. Whereas you need to have your animation before you can do shading inside of 2D animation. And then, so after you've got that all set up, you can start your render passes. This will look different between a 2D and a 3D production. In 3D production, you're going to have like your ambient occlusion, your general lights. You might have different light groups and render those out separately. You'll want to sometimes render out things in the far distance, typically are rendered separately from the things that are closer up. Sometimes you want your characters to be rendered separately from the backgrounds that they're in. So all that kind of stuff. And then with 2D animation, you'll be getting your things that you might have for your shading, get those layers set up, and you get your line work and your color work and all that kind of stuff all set up so that later on when you get into the post-production, you can start your compositing, which is the next step after rendering. And so in compositing, this is where you're going to take each of your shots of your film and you're going to layer all of your render passes together so that you have a fleshed out shot. You're also going to add any extra visual effects. These can be things like lightning bolts or just like lens flares. So all that kind of stuff, that's going to happen inside of your compositing, and you're nearly finished after you've got this done. You can then take your composited shots and bring them over into your editing. Now in editing, typically you start off with your you start off with the storyboard that you made before, and then after you bring that into your editing software like Premiere Pro, and then overlay your new composited shots inside of your editing program. You're also going to need to get your final dialogue in there just to be certain that you have everything that you need. If you're going to have any narration, this is going to be a good spot to throw it in there, and you're going to be getting your music and your sound effects like Foley art. Foley art is the process of creating the sound effects. You're going to take all that, you're going to do some sound mixing, and then you're going to have your final cut. This is pretty much the end of your film. You've completed everything. The last step is just to release it and find a distributor. So if you're going to make this for Netflix, then Netflix is your distributor. Hopefully you know who your distributor is before you're finished. But I know that there's also many cases where a lot of films we don't have a distributor, and so it's a lot of animations that are just sitting there. And so like with I won't say what productions, but I was on a production, and right now they're still looking for a distributor for it. I thought that I heard that Netflix picked it up, but I'm not sure. But it's been done for about a year, and we still haven't quite figured out where to leave it off to. Then there's merchandise and marketing, all that kind of stuff. And you might think of merchandise and marketing as the same thing. It's not quite, because sometimes if you're like Disney, you basically, the movies are the advertising and marketing for your merchandise. Whereas marketing, in the sense of film, is just going to be targeted toward letting people know about your film. So with that, you want to make sure that you are starting early in the marketing. Make sure people are able to anticipate your film coming out pretty early on. And when it comes to merchandise, you can start kind of early on. Just might want to make sure that your character designs are solidified before you do like plushies of your characters, because that can be very expensive to try to redo. So that's the production, and so at this point, I'll kind of make a small demonstration of some of that pre-production process. First, of course, you're going to have an idea. I don't have that in the steps, but I hope that you have an idea for a film before you just go into trying to make one. If you don't have an idea, you can do what I did and just steal one ancient story. So this is from one of Aesop's legends. It's the Hares and the Frogs. And then you take it and you convert it into a screenplay. There are different places you can get the formatting for. The site that I used to make this is called Celtx, CELX. I did not pay for the whole thing, so I don't really have access to like do a lot of things with it. But I'm not really a screenplay writer, so I'm or a screenwriter, so I'm okay with that. Not having that myself. But if you're doing it as a hobby, something you can do is just like set it all to a series, and then you can basically make a new screenplay for each episode of your series, and that's one workaround to have multiple screenplays. So you're going to also want your character designs. This can happen right after the screenplay. So it's not uncommon to do it like in conjunction with your storyboard, but here are some quick designs that I made. They're not very good because like this bird, it does not live in the same universe as these at all, nor does this frog, but it's a little better. But I was making this pretty quickly last week. And typically, if you're working inside of a studio, you're going to have to keep things in a good format. That's just a little thing to have in mind. If you're working on your own, you might also want to do this. It's also a good idea if you make it so that your base colors are easily accessible on your character's sheet, and that allows for very quickly getting your design in the different environments pretty quickly and colorized properly, just as a general workflow. In the animation industry, the storyboard software of choice is called Storyboard Pro. It's really good. If you've ever worked with it, you know it is. There are things that I don't like about it. Plenty of people don't like that. It's kind of difficult to animate in it, which it's not really designed to be an animation program. That would be more like Toon Boom Harmony. But unlike Toon Boom Harmony or many other softwares, this one's going to be pretty good at getting all your shots timed when you're transferring it from being a storyboard into an animatic. You can get that timing a lot more easily done inside of Storyboard Pro. Now, Storyboard Pro does cost a bit. If you aren't working somewhere where they actually have it themselves, or you're making your own thing, then you might want to use something else. I do recommend that you learn it though, because it is basically the industry standard. So if you're going to go somewhere, they're going to want you to be able to use that software. In the end, it doesn't really matter what program you're using, because in the end, they just want the guide for the film, essentially. So you could make it inside of a program like Blender, and I've done that also on some projects. For the purpose of this exercise, though, taking that Aesop legend, I just used Photoshop artboards because it was plenty easy enough. The other advantage that the storyboarding in Photoshop has is that when you have the artboard out, you can just look at everything from a bird's eye view and just evaluate if all your shots are linking up with each other without having to view the whole thing and or scrub through things. You can just kind of see it all there. So there's that little advantage. And I think the next thing is me throwing it all into Premiere, and I did a little bit of some AI magic. I haven't uploaded this onto YouTube yet. I should do that soon. Maybe I'll do that later. But just an animatic, so nothing too impressive. But here we go. Oh, you know what? I think that here, I have to switch out this audio. Okay. All right, let's try that again.
As we all know, the hare is a timid animal,
Hello?
put to flight by even a mere shadow.
Jeepers! Run!
Many have taken to simply submit to death. Rather than to be adverse to it, they choose defeat.
Get away!
Look, we haven't got it too bad. This fellow is even scared of us.
However unfortunate we may think we are, there is always someone worse off than ourselves.
All right, so that was how that went. Kind of funny enough, like, so the people that talked after I had my spiel, they were voice actors, and I felt like I probably should have made a little bit of a disclaimer. So when it comes to like the ethics of AI voices, I don't recommend that you use them for your final film. If you're making it for a scratch track for your animatic, that's fine. But you might run into some legal problems if you try to use it in another situation. But anyways, so here I've got just a quick overview look at some of the creation of your characters. So you're going to start off with a basic mesh, then you're going to get some more detail in sculpt of it, and then, but you don't want to animate with this because there aren't many computers that can have that much going on all at once. So I recommend converting it into a normal map and simplifying the geometry, and then you can get your all the materials and stuff onto there and get them some clothes, and then you can rig them up and get some good posing out of your character. This is a character I did make for just for the fun of it. I have no idea what to do with him, but hey. So then you've got all your characters, and you can go on to your next steps, which would be in production, where you're gonna take characters and throw them into environments. Sometimes you do the layout before you're done with your characters, and you see this with Monsters Inc. Although actually in this case they had the characters, I think, but they wanted to have something that was simplified, because this looks like it was done in Maya. Although I think that Pixar has their own proprietary thing, so maybe it isn't. In any case, you want to have something kind of simplified so you can have a clear view of your composition and then you basically slide your characters around, give them very basic posing. If there's a pose that's needed for the story, then you spend a little bit of time getting something kind of similar to what you're looking for. And then for things where it doesn't really matter, just keep them in their T-pose. Because it doesn't matter. The things that do matter is your composition and the timing and all that kind of stuff. In Moana, you can see that on Disney's website. And they've got some they've got their characters pretty much fleshed out. And if you've got that done, then go ahead and use them. They didn't have their backgrounds all done, but that's fine, because layout is supposed to be just the idea of your film. You typically will send this over to your animators after the fact. In 2D animation, you have all these really thin lines for all of your backgrounds. You have a general placement for your characters. It's kind of like Storyboard Plus. But the reason for all these really thin lines all over here, and you want to be very exact with that, and that's because you want, if your character is to interact with your background, you want to be able to hand your animator the layout and for them to be just the right spot, and also hand your background artist the layout as well, and for them to be able to make the final background paintings precisely where they should be, so that when you get the animator's work and the background artist's work and you put them together, you're not going to have some weird overlapping going on. So that's typically how it works out, and you're going to have all your layers situated in your composition. And your composition can be either done in a program like Photoshop or inside of a program like After Effects. And that way, when things are finalized, you can just give your compositor all of your layouts, and then they know exactly where everything goes to. And then after that, you've got your animation going on. Each practice is going to have its own kind of thing. I'm not going to go over too much on this, but it's typically just have you're gonna with 2D animation, if you're doing hand drawn, then you've got your roughs and your key poses and your cleanup, and then the coloring, and then the shading, and all that kind of, or shading, lighting, doesn't matter. On one project, I had this process for the lighting. I just did red, green, blue. Blue represented any shadows I would have in the shot. Red represented like a rim light, and then green represented the highlights. And this meant that I can make one set of image sequences of just the lighting, and then inside of After Effects I can separate them by color and have all those effects applied, and we gave a lot more control in that step of the process, without making a large file, which can be useful if you're working remotely or you have remote artists. You can have them give just the plain colors and not have to worry about a bunch of different files that will stack up on you. In 3D animation, it's you have your blocking, which consists of your key poses and whatnot, and then you have blocking plus, and then and that's basically where you're going to force the standard spline to fit along your view of how you want your characters to move. There's more to animation. There's not just character animation. Sometimes you consider creature animation to be a separate category. For instance, if you're working on a shot with an elephant, you want that elephant to move like an actual elephant in some cases. Like if you're a VFX artist, then you're going to be studying how elephants move in particular. Or if you're like one of my teachers, Sami Fassi, he was working on the dragon inside of one of the Harry Potter movies. Or it was actually a wyvern, but he had to come up with something that was kind of believable. So he took a few different animals and kind of combined all their behaviors together. And that's how he came up with how that dragon moved. But so after you've got all of your animation worked out, you've rendered things out, and you have your layers, you can throw them in your compositor like I was talking about before, and then you're going to take all those shots, you're going to overlay them, put them over your storyboard. In this example, it's just the storyboard. But if you're using programs like After Effects and Premiere Pro, that's a typical layout. And so the next thing I was speaking about was just like some of the jobs that are inside of animation. It's not just for animators or screenwriters, even just directors. There are many, many different roles to take place, and it's not just ones that take place in like the creative end of things. There's also a need for HR and accounting and all that. So there are often openings for those kinds of positions, especially in the larger studios. So if you have a passion for it, there typically is something for you. I'm not going to say that it's very easy, though. Also, when it comes to animation, it happens all over the place. So typically, if you're looking for feature film, then you're going to look at places like Burbank, LA, sometimes in Paris as well. If you remember the Despicable Me movies, there's a large studio in Paris called Illumination Makeup, and they worked a lot on that. You might recognize a lot of their work. A lot of the other places, there are feature films that are made, but not as commonly done. Typically, the animation industry works on things like advertising, music videos, and other promotional kind of content. It happens all over the place, but just a thing to keep in mind. So here I am in Phoenix, though. I wanted to point that one out since I was inside of the animation meetup here in Phoenix. Made sense to point out that we've got a bill passed just recently that started for this year, that we have a film tax credit, and that one I do believe it does transfer over into the animation field as well. So I anticipate Phoenix to kind of grow from that, especially with our proximity to the LA Burbank kind of region. I know that there's a lot of animators that would like to get out of the city into another city, but not nearly as congested. So yeah, I anticipate it growing. It might not grow immediately, super quickly, but I know that there's a bit of a push. So we'll see how things go. I'm hoping it kind of grows here. And that was pretty much my thing that I had for the talk. Oh, let's see. Charlene says that little guy looks like a long lost cousin to Ned, 21 Pilots character from a couple of their music videos. No, I don't know that I know Ned. Then I gave people my contact info. I think that was it. Yeah. Yeah, that was how my my talk with them went. I think it went pretty well. But yeah. If you're watching and you have a question, just throw it in there. If you don't have a question but you just feel like chatting, then that's cool too. There is like a minute delay though. It's somewhat annoying. But yeah. That delay kind of can be kind of a showstopper, kind of, right? If you've got a question, you're gonna have to wait like a minute for me to respond. Is there like a setting to make it so that's a little faster? Oh well. Some of the questions that they had to pertain with like how does one go about looking for a job and what are some benefits to working at like a smaller studio as opposed to one of the larger ones, and then like if someone's working in school, like if they're in school and they want to work, is it advisable and all that. And I had to keep my answer kind of vague for that one because it kind of depends on what the work is and what your own capabilities are. On the front of like looking for work, there's a lot of different resources out there. There's a really good Google sheet that has a ton of jobs from all over the world. I want to say it was made by this guy named Chris Main. But that was a pretty good resource for finding work at Valorian. See, I didn't mention on this stream, but unfortunately, Valorian had to let me go. Let me and many of the other animators go. Like right now, I still work with Valorian though, so it's not like we had some like terrible relationship either. So that's good. I am still looking for work though. My preference would be to become employed. It's sometimes fairly difficult in the animation industry to become employed because typically the way that people run things in animation is that you get hired on for specific projects, and then once your role within that project is over, then your contract is over and you move on to the next project that might not even be in that same studio. And let's see. Then there was a question of like what? Oh yeah, the advantages of being in a small studio as opposed to a large studio. If you're working in a small studio, then you have the ability to basically be on projects for longer. A small studio is going to want you to work on more fields, though, so you'll want to become a bit of a generalist. So you're not just going to do animation; you're also going to do character design and compositing, and that's what I did at Valorian. I did everything from some script writing. I don't think that we ever used any of the scripts that I made. But I don't really consider myself a screenwriter, so I'm okay with that. I was told that they were decent though, so it's not like I'm a bad one either. So, but in any case, yeah. So you're gonna be wearing a lot more hats in a smaller studio, just by the nature of it being small and there not being as many different hands to do different things. And that can be to your advantage or your disadvantage. If you don't have multiple skills, that's going to be a little more difficult for you. But if you've got more skills to be a generalist, then that can work out pretty well for you. You also are more likely to be employed as opposed to just a contractor. Now, there are benefits and pitfalls to being a contractor versus an employee. Being an employee, you are paid regularly. You have your benefits, and you have paid vacation. If you are a contractor, though, you can tend to make more money, and you get to choose which clients you work for and all that kind of stuff. I always viewed employment as basically me hiring a boss, kind of, in a way. And I paid them with letting them hold some reins in the process. Again, if you've got any questions, let me know. Let's see. Thinking I'm going to go for another 15 minutes to make it a nice round hour. I think that would be good, right? Let's see. Say that you have one thing that you want to do. You just want to be a character designer. You don't want to do anything else, just character design or prop design. Then you're going to look for a larger studio to work with. If you get that job, then just know that you're going to basically be in that thing. So I hope that you have a good passion just for that one thing. See you, Charlene. For those who might not know, Charlene's my sister. So they've got some guests over. Where was I? In a large studio. Yeah, you'll have generally one role. If you're looking to have multiple roles, you'll want to make sure that the people above you know about your different skills. In all likelihood, you'll be basically auditioning for. You're welcome. Yeah. I have some memory of a goldfish. What was I just talking about? Let's see. So large studio. Yeah, you're auditioning basically for every role that you're going to go for. Let's see. What was it going to go over? Oh yeah. So if you're a generalist, then know that a generalist If you have one thing that you like in particular, that might be what you try to use to get into a larger studio. I'm not saying this from experience because I'm kind of bad at that. I also personally prefer employment over contract work. That may or may not change with how things are going right now, but we'll see. I know that before I really did not like being a freelancer. It wasn't very like stable, so didn't care for it that way. Let's see. Yeah, if you're generalist, this also might mean that you want to have a demo reel that goes over each example of work that you want to express or get into. So if you're working in character design, then you'll want to make something that's specific to character design. Like if you've got a website will be very good if you're a generalist. Personally, I have to do that still. But the benefit is that you can categorize everything as you would like it to be categorized. So if you are trying to get into a character design role, then you have a link to your character design page. If you're trying to be a character animator, you send them to that page or that reel in particular. If you are trying to become a background artist, then you show all your background stuff. Now, on the idea of the resume, there was a question about that, I believe. But typically, when it comes to the animation industry, they're going to be more concerned about your demo reel as opposed to your resume. A resume can still be good though. You want to make sure that you put your work in there because typically in a large studio, the person that's going to look at that resume is not going to be an artist themselves. Typically, they're going to be someone from the HR department who may not have an eye for things or may not be knowledgeable enough to recognize if your animation is professional. Like, for instance, say that you're showing your blocking. Someone that is in HR may or may not actually know what blocking is and might not really take to that and understand it. So in their eyes, your resume might be more valuable to them. Showing what studios you worked with or interned with, where you went to school, all that kind of stuff. So in that case, that can be pretty valuable. And typically with like most online things, online applications, they're going to ask for a resume anyways, so that's just a default. Doesn't have to be anything too fancy, but like in my case, let me see if I can show you guys what my resume looks like. So just a moment. Work. All right. There we go. So my resume just is pretty plain. It's not as plain as it could be. I have not made a version that's just for like printout. So like I wouldn't want to print this out. It's going to take out way too much ink. But I show my education, skills and things I can use and all that kind of stuff. Have a link to my demo reel. And places I've worked with, and then the next page is like the references. I have another one that is just that one page of where I worked at can also be desirable from some people. So in that case, you'll want to use a little bit of discretion. Like, is this a place that they're gonna take their time looking through all my stuff, or would they prefer something that's fucking snappy? A smaller studio might be more interested in your longer list, but someone from the HR department might just want something that's plain and simple. Yeah. Let's see. That's another good question. Can't remember if I went over the working while in school. If you're in school, then I'd recommend that if the degree that you're going for is very important to you, then make sure that you focus on school. Don't let a contract job get in the way of it. If you need to work, then that's understandable. But if you can help it, try to make sure that your workload is not going to burn you out from your work at school, because you're spending a ton of money to go to school, and you don't want that money to go to waste. There are cases where you going to the school is all that you actually need. Like there's one animator that used to work for DreamWorks, and he went to school. He never finished though. He does still put that in his resume though, saying that that's what he went to go to school for. And then people will ask him like, when did he graduate? And he's like, I didn't. I just studied that. I didn't finish school because I just went into the work. So that would be a case where not finishing school makes sense. If you've got the work, then go ahead and just jump into the field. That can make sense. But yeah, if you're working and having school, just make sure it's not too much. I did a little bit of work while I was at Gobelin, but not too much. I wanted to make sure that I had as much focus in what I was learning and what I was doing at school, as opposed to trying to earn a few extra bucks. But yeah. If you've just graduated, you'll want to kind of self-analyze to make sure that you you want to self-analyze to make sure that your the work that you're starting off in isn't gonna be like overwhelming. Because if your school was overwhelming and you jump straight into another overwhelming thing, then you're not giving yourself enough of a cushion. And for a lot of people, that can be a quick way to get burnt out very quickly at your new job, which is not a good way to start things off. So if you need to have a buffer, then go ahead, take that little buffer. You don't want it to be too long, just so that you can kind of keep a little bit of a rule, but you want it to be just long enough so that you can recuperate yourself. In my case, I came back to the US, in which that was a lot of me getting used to speaking English again, and in many of the occasions, because like if just learning another language is enough to kind of confuse the tongue a lot. And then on top of that, I came back. I did start applying for jobs pretty quickly. But I made sure to have a little bit of a cushion just to kind of get back with family and make sure my head was screwed on straight. But yeah. But yeah, it would just determine what it is that you can handle. If you can handle a bunch, then that's great. If you can only handle one thing at a time, that's great too. Just make sure to do that one thing very well. Let's see, there was another question about like how many contract works can you do at one time? And for me, I try to make sure that it's only like maybe 2 or 3 things at once. I don't want to do more than that, because if I have more than that, then I risk not only burning myself out, but also crossing wires and getting one project confused with another, and that can be a little bit more of a time waster for me. It'll take more time to transition from one job to another, especially if I have a number of them and I have to kind of like take a step back and be like, all right, which job am I actually doing right now? Okay, now I can start. Just that shifting of gears. Some people can shift gears very, very quickly. I'm unfortunately not one of those people, but yeah. I think that it's pretty much time to say au revoir. So, thanks for watching. I hope that this was kind of useful for you. It's mostly going over the animation pipeline. Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks for watching. Catch you next time.